We want to continue discussing tonight regarding the laws of Shmirat HaBrit, regarding the Brit. There were certain odds and ends that we missed last time, so therefore we want to fill in all these little blanks, because there was also some questions that were asked regarding these things. One of the most important questions that was asked by a friend of ours is regarding the use of a condom. Is a person is allowed to use a condom, is having relations, even if the relations are permitted, let's say he's with his wife. The question is, are you allowed to use a condom? So, what's the answer, Rabbi? The answer is that the condom is really a very, very big problem, according to Jewish law. The reason is because the semen, according to Jewish law, has to go into the receptacle. It has to go into the uterus. So therefore, if it's not able to go in there, if it's being blocked by a piece of rubber or whatever it is, right? Whatever that thing is made of, latex, whatever it is, basically that's considered to be like you're spilling a seed on the ground, because it's not going to the place where it has to go. According to Jewish law, as we find in the words of the Chidah, it has to go, the semen has to go inside towards the uterus, it has to go in there, because otherwise it's not possible to impregnate. And even if the woman is not able to be impregnated at this time, nevertheless, semen has to go inside there. So therefore, anything less than that, anything which doesn't meet those conditions, especially when you're using a condom, where basically, right, it's not going in at all, it's being stopped and halted, and then it's going to be thrown out into the garbage. So therefore, right, since the sperm is not going where it has to go, for sure the use of the condom is a very big problem. It's considered to be basically like wasting his seed. It's considered to be like masturbation. It's considered to be like the sin of Aaron Onan, as we said, the sons of Yehuda, who died because of the sin that they spilled their seed on the ground. So therefore, using the condom is a very, very big problem. And for sure, in most 99.99% of the cases, and when having intercourse with your wife or with your spouse, it's not allowed to use a condom. There may be some exceptions, as we find in some of the authorities, that a person can use such a thing when it comes to issue of disease or danger or all kinds of things like this. There has to be some kind of very special permission. So a person should never, God forbid, use one of these things, one of these condoms, without getting permission from a competent rabbi who knows how to decide in these things, who knows how to write the paskin halacha, he knows how to formulate the halacha. Otherwise, a person should never use any of these devices like that, since it's considered to be basically spilling one's seed. So therefore, as we said last week, we mentioned that this is considered to be spilling seed. Masturbation is considered to be one of the biggest sin of the Torah. Not one, but actually the biggest sin of the Torah. That's why it says in Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, a person has to be very, very careful not to use a condom in most cases, unless it was specifically recommended by a rabbi because of some dangerous or some kind of situation where there's illness involved or whatever, something like that, where it's absolutely necessary, and without that it's not possible. Otherwise, we cannot use these devices for any purpose whatsoever. Regarding using other types of contraception, right? We have we have the IUD, we have the pill, we have all kinds of other things as well. We have all kinds of creams and all kinds of things. So, is a person allowed to use contraception? So the answer is, Rabbi, a Jewish man, when he gets married, he has a mitzvah pruvu. What does that mean? He has to be fruitful and multiply. So therefore, since pruvu, being fruitful and multiplying, is considered to be the main reason why a person gets married. So therefore, when a person gets married now, as a newlywed to his wife, he's definitely not allowed to use any form of contraception whatsoever. And that's what we find in the Shulchan Aruch, that a person has to marry in a manner, he has to get married in a manner that's possible to have children. If it's possible, if that woman is able to have children, and a man is able to also have children, if they're both able to have children, so in a case like that, a person cannot use any contraception, because the man has the mitzvah pruvu of being fruitful and bringing children. The minimum of children that a man has to have is one daughter and one son. So therefore, until he has had that amount of children, at least one daughter and one son, he has not fulfilled his obligation in terms of having children. So therefore, until that point, there's nothing to talk about using contraception. And we heard that there was some uneducated rabbis who gave permission to use these kinds of things. You know what they say, right? They say that, they should first find out if they're compatible for a little while, and then have children. Let them wait 1 or 2 years, because man, why? Because otherwise they may get divorced and whatever. So then it's going to turn out to be worse. But the truth is, Rabbi, that a person has to have faith in Hakadosh Baruch Hu. If he really has faith in Hashem, and he knows that Hakadosh Baruch Hu does everything for the best, so therefore, right, he shouldn't have no qualms about that and say, oh, let me first get to know and this and that. Also, there are also other people. There's other couples also who make all kinds of other excuses, right? All kinds of other procrastinations. Why they use contraception? They say, well, we're not established yet financially, and so forth and so on, right? And we're not, we don't have the position properly, in business yet. We're not advanced enough in business and the position and the work and whatever. All these things, they say we gotta wait a little bit, until we get more established, and then we'll have children. The truth is, Rabbi, that this is considered to be a very big lack in faith. You know why? Because the Chazal teach us that a child who comes into the world, he brings his own mazal with him. What does that mean? That the parnasah, the sustenance of that child, Kadosh Baruch Hu sends it with the child itself, and therefore, right, who gets that? That money? The parents do, because since Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that the parents have to support that child until he grows up, until he's able to support himself. So therefore, they send the money to the parents in order that they should be able to sustain the child. So therefore, a person should never say, we don't have money now, and this and the kind of thing. That's considered to be a lack of faith. Because if a person has really faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he should know that when the child comes, he also comes with him, right, the sustenance that child is supposed to have. Every person, when he comes to this world, he comes with a certain mazal, with a certain fortune regarding his financial situation. So therefore, there isn't one person in this world, right, who doesn't come with some kind of financial support that Kadosh Baruch Hu gives him. So the child is also coming with that, and therefore, right, it's not considered to be a legitimate claim to say, we don't have money now, let's wait till we get richer, till we get more established. It's considered to be, Rabbatai, a very poor excuse, right, for refraining from doing the mitzvah pruvu. As we know from the Zohar Kadosh, teaches over there, the Zohar Kadosh, regarding the severity of a person who doesn't do pruvu, who doesn't have children. He didn't have children. So if a person didn't have children, as we said, right, at least one boy and girl, and he left the world like that, so he doesn't have any portion in the world to come. He's going to have to suffer very greatly. They say, right, that he's going to have to come back to the world, and it's going to be very difficult for him to rectify the sin of not having children. So therefore, a person should be very, very careful not to get into a marriage like that where they agree not to have children, because otherwise they're missing the whole point of the marriage. The whole point of the marriage is to have children, right? Not just to have fun, have a good time, and advance in the career and these kinds of things, right? Go to vacations and this and that. That's not the main point. The main point is to have children. So therefore, Rabbi, since Hakadosh Baruch Hu wants the world to be populated, he doesn't want the world to be desolate, as it says in the verse. So therefore, we have to do the will of God and be fruitful and multiply and have children. Once a person has had already 2 children, one boy and one girl, so there the rabbi said a person should try to continue and have more children. Right? They added a separate, a special mitzvah here to continue. Try to have more, as much as possible, as the sages teaches us. Right? That even if a person had children when he was young, and he gets older now, right? Let's say he became widowed or got divorced, whatever. He should try to now take another wife and have more children. Why is that? Because you're not really sure who's going to turn out good or bad. So a person should continue having children all his life, whenever he's physically able. That's the mitzvah of the rabbis that they added to the mitzvah of the Torah of having at least one boy and one girl. So, but nevertheless, there are some cases where, if the wife, is having a great deal of trouble raising more children, and she already had several children, and she can't, she has a very hard time to do more. So therefore, in a case like that, sometimes the rabbis will allow, in certain cases, that a woman should use contraception because she's not able to take care of more children. She's not physically or whatever, mentally or emotionally able to do that. So once they've had the minimum of one boy and one girl, so then there is an issue. There is, right, a possibility to come ask a rabbi, a competent rabbi, to give permission to use contraception. But until they got into that point, there certainly is no permission to use contraception for any purpose like that, because the mitzvah of the Torah is to have at least one boy and one girl. But nevertheless, Rabbatai, even if the rabbis will give permission to use contraception, they will never give permission to use a condom, because the condom is considered to be like wasting seed, since the um, the, um, the sperm, the semen, does not go inside into the uterus. It doesn't go in there at all. It has no possibility to go in there. It's being locked up and shut up, right? And therefore, using a condom is never an option in any case like that, unless, as we said, right, there's some kind of very, very severe problem that has to be dealt with by a competent rabbi. So that's the rule regarding contraception, Rabbi. The truth is that the types of contraception that allow the semen to go in without being hindered are considered to be better in halacha. Why is that? As we said, right, since the semen has to go in, we require that in Jewish law. So therefore, if a person can use, if he has to use contraception, better to use types of contraception which allow the semen to go in unhindered. So therefore, right, the condom is the worst of all of them, right? And also, a diaphragm is also right doesn't allow the sperm to go in, the semen to go in. So therefore, also they will not be on the top of the list. So therefore, the better option would be to use things like IUD and pill, because those things, right, do not hinder physically the sperm from going inside. This is the reason why, so all these things, Rabbi, a person has to know that if a person, why are we talking about this tonight? Because we're talking about guarding the Brit. So if a person is spilling his seed like that into a condom and not allowing it to go into the uterus of the woman, so he's actually harming the Brit as well, as because he's spilling his seed, and it's considered to be like masturbation. So this is a very severe thing, right? It's one of the biggest sin of the Torah is considered to be this. So using a condom would also qualify as being the biggest sin of the Torah. That's how severe it would be, Rabbi. Regarding, we also wanted to talk about the issue of some people asked about how is a person allowed to be with his wife right in the bedroom. So there are also halachot regarding this. We find in the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Mem and Orach Chaim, and also in Ibn Ezer. There's also a place there that talks about this. And a person has to know these things because these things can harm the child or help the child or whatever. So the truth is, Rabbi, that when it comes to the positions that a man, between man and his wife, the best position, according to the halacha, according to Kabbalah, is a missionary position. You know why? Because this fulfills two things. One is that the man is on top, which is the better way of doing it, and also the fact that they're facing each other, the man and the woman, which is considered to be a very good thing, right? There's facial contact. So this makes more of a loving relationship, more of a close relationship during the intercourse. So therefore, right, according to Kabbalah, the proper way to do intercourse between man and wife is to be facing each other. So even though it's allowed for a man who to come from behind his wife and do it this way, it's allowed according to halacha, but according to Kabbalah, this is not the preferred way. But if a person wants to do it, once in a while, whatever, from time to time, that's fine. And even if he, that's his desire, it is allowed according to halacha, but according to Kabbalah, the best way to do is the missionary position. Regarding the other positions, right? Now the question is like this: what about if the woman is on top, right? So there, the Gemara says, and also we find in the Halacha and Shulchan Aruch, this is called derech azut. What does that mean? That this is like arrogant way of doing intercourse. So therefore, what that means is that if a person does this way, there's a certain blemish there in this kind of intercourse. So a person should try to avoid doing this kind, right? Should not do it. Also, as the Chazal teach us, right, that when a person is, let's say, if a person wants to do intercourse when he's standing, so the question is it allowed to do intercourse when you're standing? So the truth is, right, that this is going to be a problem. Why is that? Because the Chazal teach us that when a person does it standing, it's not possible to get pregnant like that, since, right, the gravity will bring the sperm down and not allowed to go into the proper place, to shoot into the proper place. So therefore, they say that when a person has intercourse standing, it's not possible to get impregnation like that. Also, there's another issue involved with this, which is that they say it also weakens the body. What does that mean? That when a man does it in a standing position, it weakens his body. So therefore, the sages say, right, that it's really, really not recommended at all to have intercourse while standing. There's actually a story brought down in the Midrashim, in the Agadot, where we find that actually there was one king, one of the kings of Yehuda. Who was that? We're talking about Yechoniah, who actually what happened was he was put in jail by Nebuchadnezzar, and what happened was that when Nebuchadnezzar died, right, the king of Babel, so then his son, Evil Merodach, he took this king of Yehuda out of prison eventually. But what happened was that they allowed his wife to go into the cell where he was being imprisoned, and to have intercourse with her. But they say, right, that they had to do it standing. Why? Because there wasn't enough room in that cell for two people. It was, can you imagine such a tight cell, prison cell? There wasn't enough room over there, so therefore they had to have intercourse standing. But they say the interesting thing is like this, right? That there, his wife got impregnated with a child, even though they were standing. So the question is, how did that happen? So the answer of the sages that this was a miracle that Kadosh Baruch Hu made in that case because he wanted to continue the line of the kings of Yehuda, right, which is the kingdom of the house of David, David HaMelech, which Mashiach is going to come from there. So therefore, right, there was a special need that Kadosh Baruch Hu should allow this woman to get pregnant. So therefore, there was a miracle made there against the nature. And what does that mean? That the miracle was that even though they did it standing, they had relations when they were standing. Nevertheless, she got pregnant and she had a child from there. And this the line of the kings of Yehuda, which Mashiach comes from, was able to continue. Right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to continue. That was the only way to continue at that time. Interesting thing, Rabbi. So also we find another interesting. What about it's a scenario side by side? Let's say right, they're both each one lying on the side of each other, and they have relations this way. So there, right, says the Gemara, teaches us the Shulchan Aruch also that this is derech ikesh. What does that mean? That this is considered to be like not a proper way to do intercourse. They're on side by side, right? It's not considered to be a proper way. It's considered ikesh. The word ikesh in Hebrew, it means like not straight, crooked, something like not straight. A way of right. This is like it's a way of we call that right when you deviate from the proper way and you go in the crooked way. So it's like deception, it's like a way of deception. That's the idea. So anyway, that what that means to say is that a person should try not to do it this way, side by side, right, between a man and a woman, because this may also cause sort of a blemish in the child, in the character of the child. He's going to be a deceptive person, a person who's not so honest, not straight, crooked, weasel kind of guy, this kind of thing, right? So therefore, right, these two types of positions, when the woman is on top and also side by side, these are not recommended, right? But the truth is that they're also not prohibited according to halakha. We don't find it as a prohibition, but it tells the sages that this is not recommended because of them. It's considered to be like a bad way of bringing the child into the world, that the influence on the child will be somewhat negative there. So therefore, right, a person preferably should try to avoid these positions, but there may be right some cases where it may be allowed. In certain cases, one should ask a rabbi regarding this, right? Regarding if he needs permission to do these kinds of things. Sometimes we do allow it. For instance, let's say if the woman is pregnant, like let's say, right? So what happens is that when the woman is pregnant, the man, right, cannot go too deep inside the woman during the relations. So therefore, what he has to do is he has to go not so deep. So sometimes to do it side by side, it makes it like a little bit less deep. So therefore, right, it may be permitted in cases like that. Because anyway, she can't get pregnant, so it's not going to affect the child. She already has a child. She already has a fetus on her stomach, right, in her uterus. So therefore, in cases where there's not going to be any impregnation, let's say the woman is already past menopause or whatever, she can't get pregnant for some reason or other, whatever. So there, in cases like that, positions like this may be more permitted. But when it comes to a person who's really trying to have children, so positions like this would be definitely not recommended, right? To try to avoid it when you're trying to impregnate your wife in cases like this. Also, Rabbi, regarding there's also a question regarding anal and oral, this kind of thing, right? So the question is are these things allowed? So the sages teach us that when it comes to anal, right, a person is allowed to do it, even though there's a dispute regarding all kinds of opinions there down in Talmud. But the conclusion of the Gemara over there, according to Tosfot, according to the Rosh, is that a person is allowed to do it if he has a desire to have anal. Right, so he is allowed to do it once in a while, not every time, once in a blue moon, whatever, once in a while. If he has a desire to do it, he can do it. So the problem is like this, right, that he can't impregnate his wife, obviously, when he's doing it anally. So therefore, right, this is the problem. He can't do impregnation. But on the other hand, we find in the Talmud that this is considered to be really intercourse. Anal intercourse is considered to be intercourse. It's not the normal way, it's the abnormal way, but it's considered to be a form of intercourse. So therefore, if a person has really a desire to do it, he can do it once in a while. The truth is, right, but if a person doesn't have a desire to do, right, it's better to avoid it. Why? Because there's issue of also wasting seed. She can't get impregnated inside the anal way. So therefore, if a person doesn't need to do it, doesn't have really a desire to do it, and it's also what his wife doesn't want, so therefore the better option is to avoid this kind of position altogether. Also, when it comes to oral, right, there are some issues involved with this, right? We find in the Talmud that there is an opinion over there that a man should not perform oral on his wife, because this can cause all kinds of defects with the children. The Gemara, but the conclusion of the Talmud over there, the Gemara, is that it is allowed to do it. Even the halacha is not like the first opinion that we just mentioned. It is allowed to do it, but here also, since it's a machloket, since it's there's a dispute, and also we find the same dispute brought down in the poskim as well, right? The Rambam allows to do like that, and the Ravad, who was the great rival, the Ravad, who was the great rival of the Rambam, does not allow to do. So therefore, since we do find that there is a machloket and there's two different opinions, if a person has a desire to do it, so there, in a case like that, he can do. If he doesn't have such a desire to do it, better to avoid these things altogether. Why is that? Because you're getting into a dispute, right? One says it's allowed, one says it's not allowed. You're getting yourself into a position where, right, you may be transgressing something. So therefore, right, if a person doesn't need to do any of these things, also the Rambam says that even though, according to his opinion, it's allowed to do, these kinds of things. Nevertheless, he says, right, if a person wants to be holy and sanctify himself and not do it, he doesn't really have a desire for it so much. So therefore, better not to do Rabbi. This is the idea. So a person has to know that there are also rules regarding these things in the Shulchan Aruch regarding what a person does with his wife in the bedroom. A person has to study these things more at length. Where a person can ask a rabbi to give him lessons about this. If he's getting married, he's a newlywed, he doesn't know about these rules, so he should actually sit down with some competent rabbi, and he should teach him these rules, because it can definitely affect the way the children come out, the purity of the children. The person has to know how to do everything the proper and pure and holy way, according to our tradition that we received on Mount Sinai. So a person, Rabotai, has to have emunah regarding these things. What does that mean, emunah? Faith. He has to have faith. So a person sometimes doesn't understand why these rules are made like the way they are. But the truth is, right, that these rules we receive from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we receive them from Har Sinai. So therefore, a person shouldn't, take them lightly and say, well, I don't understand these things. From me, this is just like a closed book, something kind of mystery. There's a story brought down regarding David HaMelech, right? That there's a rule brought down in the Chumash, in the Torah we find, right? In the 5 books of Moses, we find over there that a person, when it comes to the 2 nations of Ammon and Moab, he's not allowed to seek their welfare. What does that mean? He's not allowed to go to them and say, how are you doing? All kinds of things like this. He's not allowed to seek their welfare. Why is that? Because they became our enemies. They betrayed us, right? These 2 nations. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, do not ever seek their welfare. These 2 nations, Ammon and Moab, because they're thankless people. They have no appreciation for these kinds of things. Since they're thankless and they have no appreciation, so therefore we're not allowed to seek their welfare. So King David HaMelech, he had a friendship with one of the kings of Ammon, right? His name was Nachash, right? He was a snake. That was his name. So he had a friendship with this guy. He actually did him some favors also, David HaMelech. He saved his family from being killed by giving them a place to dwell while the war was going on. The civil war was going on with Shaul. So what happened over there was that David HaMelech, once Nachash died, right, the king of Ammon, so he tried to seek out the welfare, right, to send emissaries to the country of Ammon to console him, right, about his loss. His father died. His father died. His father passed away. So he wanted to console them. He wanted to console the Ammonim, right. So what happened was that instead of being consoled, right, what they did was they took those emissaries and they shaved them and they took off their clothes and stripped them naked, half naked, and half their beards are shaved off. And they sent them back like that. So what happened was David HaMelech realized, once he saw that these people, again, right, they had no appreciation. He realized that he made a big mistake by sending emissaries to the king of Ammon to seek out their welfare. Even though Nachash, who was actually the king of Ammon, was a good friend of David, but nevertheless, right, since the Torah commands us not to seek out their welfare because they have no appreciation, they're thankless people, right? So therefore, even in a case where there's friendship involved there, we're not allowed to go over the words of the Torah. So what do we see from there, Rabbi? We see from there, even if a person doesn't understand why the words of the Torah were made for certain things, we don't understand the reasons behind them. Nevertheless, a person has to keep them, with a real faith. He has to know. We have to know that all these things were given on Har Sinai. They were given by the words of God. These are the words of God. They're not a man-made religion like the other religions. This is the real thing, the words of God. So therefore, a person has to be careful, right, a great leap of faith in a Jew is when he says, you know what, I know that the words of the Torah are all true, they're all emet. So therefore, even though I don't understand them, I will keep them anyway. As the Jews said right on Har Sinai when they received the Torah, they said Naseh v'nishma. What does that mean? We'll do everything and then we'll try to understand. First we do. Right? That's the proper way the attitude of the Jew should be. That attitude should be, I'll do, and then I'll try to understand why I'm doing it. Even though right now I don't understand, but since I know that it's the word of God, He's the manufacturer, He's the one who commanded us. He knows better than we do, right? So how can we try to argue with His words? How can we try to rebuff His words, right? There's no way to do such things like this. So therefore, a person has to have faith and do the will of God, even though he doesn't understand the reasons behind it. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen. Chazak u'Baruch.